That way they can see.
Can you turn the lights off, please?
All right, that's the test right there. No feedback. We don't want another incident. You can only have one incident a year, and they already had that one this morning. All right, so can everybody hear me? It's going to be. I'm not used to having to sneak up on a mic like this, like I'm trying to eat it or something. But I realized that I kind of need to be this close, and I can't stand out here and see the pictures and the screen without using this mic. So anyway, I do appreciate the opportunity. He is right. So he asked me. You guys saw in the bulletin, and I was asked to come and speak about beliefs. You're going to get more than you asked for. So because I'm not going to take a mic and not have an opportunity to preach. So we're going to put a message in here. And the first trip I went with Dwayne. Dwayne came and basically, I think he asked me, but somehow in my ears he was telling me that I needed to go with him to El Salvador. And I said, yes, sir. And if you're going to go on a mission trip, let me tell you, you need to go with Dwayne. I unfortunately was not able to pair up with him. We went with two, and so we were sent out by twos, and Dwayne had his team and went to the fancy churches with the air conditioning and fancy pools and all those things. I went to the jungle where it was hot and sweaty and everything. But no, and actually that is a true story. But it was one that he was like, you got to go where? I'm stuck in this church, But anyway, it's where God had placed us. But I was very fortunate to be able to go with Dwayne and hope to go to many more. If you ever have the opportunity, you know that he's got hundreds of stories where he and Debbie went out and shared the gospel, and that's a pretty awesome thing. I just have a handful. So, but tonight, like I said, I'm gonna tie a couple of different trips in. And there was some things going on in my life before I went to El Salvador that I was questioning, and I'm going to throw these in here, what God gave me when I was in El Salvador about those questions. So I'm going to share that with you as well. I have to do without the stand. I can't do that. I can't stand still, so we're going to hope this thing lets me move around. Before we begin, I do want to tie in a couple of scriptures to say. These are very common scriptures. These are scriptures that most of you in this room are going to know. I've probably memorized almost every scripture that I'm going to use. The first one, though, is about religion. Religion is something that, hold on, I better put a clock up here. We'll be in here way past when the Brahms closes. So I'm going to watch that. And that's why they cut the music out, because Trey said he's really long-winded, so don't do any music. So, anyway, we see in James 1:27, it talks about religions. I don't know about you guys, but I don't like to be called religious. I don't take it as an insult. I just don't like to be called religious because most of the people who ask me if you must be religious, I know what they're talking about. And I know they're not talking about being a follower of Jesus. Right? They're talking about that I go to church, they're talking about other things. But nowhere does it come up that I'm a follower of Jesus. I'm a follower of Christ. So I kind of get away from this whole religious connotation. However, I will say that God says here in James 1:27, pure and undefiled religion in the sight of our God and Father is this: to visit orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself unstained by the world. So basically, if you sum this up, and just know that normally, you can ask the kids, I don't normally pick out one verse and try and teach anything on that verse. That's a very dangerous thing. You don't know what the context is. But I can tell you in the context of this verse, he's not trying to tell you that the only thing we should be focused on is to watch after the orphans and take care of the widows. What he's trying to say is these are examples. These are examples of the vulnerable. Okay, so we're called to watch out and take care of the vulnerable. Take care of those that can't take care of themselves. It's very important. We're called for this. And then in Matthew 28:19, what do we do with this? We God, Jesus was very clear with his last statement that we see here in Matthew 28. He tells us to go, therefore, and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, teaching to observe all that I have commanded you, and lo, I am with you always, even to the end of age. If you've ever heard a missionary speak, this is what they start with, right? Because this is the trumpet, this is the sound, this is the go, right? This is what they heard when God says, "I want you to go," right? So this is the scripture. Now, what do we do with these things, right? That's what I want to talk about tonight. Now, before we move on to any photographs or anything like that, I want you to understand this was kind of difficult for me. I was a little torn whether or not I should share this, okay? Because you'll see some pictures of me that I didn't take. Somebody else took them while we were on a mission trip, and I even had to explain to them. They were from El Salvador. They were trying to do good things. This is not about us taking a photo op. This is not about let's create a situation that looks really different than what everybody's used to so we can take some cool pictures and go share it at the church. This is not about that at all. If in any way the recipient of the gospel feels this way, we don't want cameras anywhere near this. Because that's not what this is about. This is about their soul and where they're going to spend eternity and sharing what Jesus did for you with them, right? Now, they were able to take some photographs, and I am going to share them. But I want you to understand this has nothing to do with me. I mean, I'm a country boy from Roosevelt that barely made it through high school. That it's a miracle that I can even stand up here and speak into a microphone. Okay? This is not about me at all. This is about what God does. Okay? But I want you to see a picture of what these scriptures mean. Okay? So what this looks like in real life. And then if you want to hear more and more and more stories, like I said, you can find somebody like Dwayne who goes and goes and goes, and you can hear these stories. And then when God starts tugging at your heart that you need to go, you need to step forward. Okay? So, hopefully my little gadget here works. Oh, really? What happened? It was working wonderfully until everybody came in. Well, that's where I got it plugged in right here. Yeah. Well, what is...
Unplug it and plug it back in.
Let me turn it on and turn it back off.
Check, see if they...
Oh, yeah. It's not going to work. Just see if you can go with the... We'll just say no to this. Can you move it to the next screen? It should just be the up and down arrow.
Actually, it's side by side.
Or side to side. There you go.
Probably need to
No, it's locked up.
exit and start over.
So while they work on this, I'm not somebody who's gone on lots of mission trips, like some of these people in here that are sitting on one row, especially. I am somebody who's been on a couple. Okay, and the very first one, let me tell you this. I'm going to tell you this so that you'll understand. If you ever feel called to go, that you'll understand. When the very first time I felt called to go on a mission trip, I had never shared Jesus with anybody. Okay, so on the plane, I'm praying, God, I'm not sure what you have in mind here, but this was not a good idea. I've never shared the gospel with anybody, and you got me going to Chile to share the gospel with people. Okay, and an amazing thing happened was that I was able to, let's see if this is working now. Yes, I have it. I have control. Thank you, sir. Ooh. Very good. So, 1 John, we're gonna skip that story for time, okay? And we're gonna go to obedience. God works with me in a very special way because when I say that, meaning special, meaning that I'm simple, okay? And so I've concluded that in order to get through my simple mind, he works in certain ways with me. I get a certain message about, very much like your message this morning, about forgiveness for weeks and even possibly months, depending on how slow I am. And then for the last few weeks, it's been about obedience. And I don't know if you've studied a lot and really prayed a lot about obedience. It's not a fun thing, okay? on. You get a lot of toes stepped on. That's what I've been on for quite some time. And it comes at me from listening to Mark, and he has no idea what God's been speaking to me about. It comes from my wife and I's Bible study, a study that I listen to in my pickup at work every day, my quiet time. I just get hammered with these things. So this is one of the things that I've been looking at for studying for the last couple of about 4 weeks now. And it's obedience. What does God think about obedience? Well, listen, we're not born with knowing how to obey. We're born knowing how to disobey, and we have to learn how to obey, right? You watch a group of little children, and you can find that out real fast. They know how to disobey, right? You just have to teach them how to obey. Okay, so in 1 John 5:3, we see here, "For this is the love of God, that we keep His commandments, and His commandments are not burdensome." So why do we keep the commandments? Why do we obey? We obey because we love God. And why do we love God? Because He created us. We realize He's our Father. And He sent His Son to the cross as the ultimate sacrifice for my life. It says here that we keep His commandments, we obey, and they're not burdensome. We don't obey because we're trying to follow some rules. We're not obeying because we feel obligated. We obey because we love God for what He did for us. Okay? And in Luke 6:46, Jesus gives us this little short, quick statement that says, "Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do what I say?" I realize how short that is. I realize also that I'm talking to a group that probably knows the context of this text. But what I want you to focus on is Lord, Lord. Why do you call me Lord, Lord? Romans 10:9 says that if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord, and don't forget that. We say that like it's no big deal. Right? And we believe in our heart that God raised Him from the dead, we will be saved. Okay? When you say that, people say this is too easy. That's because you don't understand it. You don't understand what Lord means. When you make Jesus your Lord, it means that I'm no longer going to live for what I want to do. I'm going to live for what Jesus wants to do. In other words, you're giving your life away. That's not easy at all. As a matter of fact, it's one of the hardest things you can do. Because we're born selfish. We want what we want when we want it. Okay? This is about giving your life to Jesus. And He's saying, why do you even call me Lord if you won't do what I say? Because that's the whole point. If He's my Lord, that means He's my boss. He makes the call. I do what He says. Now, I turned it off. That was me, by the way. That was operator error. Now, how can you understand obedience if you don't know the other side? If you're simple like me, you need to know that, right? You can't understand hot without understanding cold, right? You can't understand good without bad. Okay, if you understand obedience, how do you know without disobedience? I want to look to a quick story here about our first king Saul. And in 1 Samuel 15, 22 and 23, we see Samuel says to Saul, "Has the Lord as much delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Lord? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to heed than the fat of rams. For rebellion is as sin of divination, and insubordination is as iniquity and idolatry. Because you have rejected the word of the Lord, He has rejected you from being king." Now, this was hard for him to hear. When the prophet comes to you, a man who's been speaking directly to God, who knows exactly what God told Saul to do. Saul had very specific instructions, and he partially obeyed them. He was to conquer and kill every living thing. He didn't do that. He left the king alive in this situation, and some of the best choice animals. And then he made up an excuse when he was called out by the prophet, by God, that, well, they were going to sacrifice these animals. So in other words, he thought he had a better plan than God did. And He would save these animals, and then He would sacrifice them. And this is the message that he got back. It's better to obey than to sacrifice. God cares about the obedience. Now what I want you to see here is that the key is partial obedience is disobedience. Don't we do that all the time? God calls you to do something and you do part of it and you feel good that you did part of it. But what we see in this scripture is that that's disobedience. And what we see is that that's rebellion. And God doesn't tolerate rebellion. Now I want you to really, don't be angry at me that I pointed this out. It's right there in front of you. Then it says rebellion is the same as witchcraft and idolatry. See, we understand how rebellious, how awful it would be to practice witchcraft and to worship idols. But what we forget is that God says that disobedience is rebellion, and rebellion is the same as witchcraft and idolatry. It's serious. We're not to disobey the Father. All right. I promise you all of it won't be that heavy. Now, when I went to El Salvador, before I went to El Salvador, I'd been really kind of stressed about something that happened. It started back in 2014. And I apologize, somehow, when I changed the slides, this is the only one that's out of order. That is clearly not him. And on the 7-year-old is actually the third picture, and it moved him out of order somehow on his slide. But this is Ramadani. Okay? Ramadani and Sylvia and I had never met. But in 2014, I took a youth group to Winter Jam, and Winter Jam had Compassion International there. They followed them around, and they handed out some packets, and I felt God really heavy on my heart, saying that I should help out one of these children. So I took a packet, and Ramadani and I met on that day. We have letters and pictures going back and forth constantly. He's been asking for me to visit for a very long time, and it breaks my heart that hasn't happened yet. We were really close, and then COVID hit, and they haven't opened the doors up yet. So we have not been able to travel. And I began to get a little stressed out about this, okay? So I began to worry about compassion. Is compassion, are they taking care of Ramadani? Because when you pray for somebody every day, this young man's photograph has been in my quiet room right next to my granddaughter. Okay, so I pray for him every day. You fall in love, right? You don't have to know them. You fall in love with them. Then the letters and all these things. So this is my son, right? This is our Tanzanian African son. And we know each other quite well. We just never have been able to meet. Well, when I went to El Salvador, you're going to see that I found out that compassion is everything I'd hoped it would be. So, 7 years old, 2015. I didn't put all the pictures, but I put quite a few, so you can watch it and grow up. It's really interesting. You see a lot of these pictures that have the building materials. That's cool because they're actually building a house. Okay, those are with gifts. So, every once in a while, and this is not about Sylvia and I. This is not about us at all. This is about God gives you an opportunity to change a life. Okay, and to do an amazing thing. So they're actually building a house. And you can see he's 15 years old. He'll be 16 in September. So I know they grow up really fast, even if you're not on the same continent. But he's a very special young man. And I can't wait. One of these days, they make it hard for you to find out the exact location. I understand the safety. I understand. They're trying to protect him. But until they open up that travel, it's going to be difficult for me to see him until he is of age. And then we'll be able to go over and find out exactly where he's at. We can just make it a family trip and not a Compassion International trip. Now, I wanted to share something with you with a young man, Wilson. Wilson is from El Salvador. This is my translator when we went on the mission trip. And I asked him to share with me his experience in compassion, saying that I'm going to share this with my church. So we'll listen to this real quick.
Hi there, my name is Wilson. I'm 24 years old and I am from El Salvador. Today, guys, I'm going to share with you my experience being part of Compassion International. When I was 4 years old, I got into the program, and believe me that since I started going to the project, God blessed me a lot because I was sponsored by this woman whose name was Samantha. She sponsored me for many years, and believe me that she really blessed my life through Compassion International because every time I used to go to the project, I used to receive food and I used to receive biblical lessons. That was the most important part. I remember that since I was like 7 years old, I knew about Jesus. I knew that Jesus was my Savior, and I learned different biblical lessons that the teachers used to taught me at the project. And also my two older sisters were part of another project, and God bless us a lot because my mother didn't used to worry about our school supplies, because in the project they used to give us books and school supplies for going to school. And let me tell you that this organization is really wonderful because it blesses children's life around the world, because children know about Jesus. Children know about Jesus since they are very little. So I encourage you, if you have the opportunity to sponsor a child around the world, you can do it, because you don't imagine how you can impact a child's life by going to a project. Because in the project, there are a lot of advantages, like receiving food every time you go, receiving, if you can send gifts to your sponsored child. So believe me, that is a really wonderful program that you can bless someone's life. And the most important is that every children that go to the project, they know about Jesus. And that helps us a lot, because when I was a child, that helped me not to make bad decisions in my life. Because I knew that God didn't like bad things. So I learned that in the project. I learned about that Jesus was my Savior. And believe me, that I am really thankful with Samantha, because she sponsored me for many years. So if you have the opportunity to do so, please do it. And if you are sponsoring a child, please make the effort and go to visit that child if you have the opportunity, because you don't imagine how you will change a child's life by visiting him or her. I encourage you to do so, guys, and this is all what I have to say about Compassion International. That's a really wonderful program, and may the Lord bless you and your family. Bye.
All right, so I had to realize that from my wife that some of those things are hard to understand. You have to understand that most of the people I work with, English is the second language. So to me, he speaks perfect English, and I understand that a lot of people, they hear it and they're like, what is he talking about? Project, program, right? And they call the Compassion International project for the kids. That's what they call it. It's a project. So that's when he's saying project. I need you to understand something before we move on from Compassion International. That's not all why I'm here. I didn't bring a bunch of packets or anything like that, but I'm telling you that if you want to be involved in something like this, you come to me, I'll help you get signed up, okay? It is amazing. This young man right here is 4 years old in El Salvador at a time when there was nothing but gangs. Dwayne can tell you, 9 months before we arrived in El Salvador, they were arresting a large percentage of the population. When I say large, like 10% of the population went to prison, like that. If you had a tattoo, you were in jail, right? This is the kind of sweep that they did across the country within the year that we went. Okay, so at that time, here's a young man that went through the program, and not only did he stay out of gangs, now he's going around sharing the gospel. You see what kind of change this can make in the world? And it's not just him. There were 2 of these kids that were on our team, and then the oldest of the translator was a teacher for Compassion. So I had questions with God about Compassion International, and he filled me full of people from El Salvador from there. So I feel very comfortable promoting it now. So that's an opportunity that you have to make a big change. And again, if you were interested, we did it again. Yep. All right, Trey, you're up. And it's showing here, so it's just on the PowerPoint. So like I said, it's really easy to get signed up, but I will say that if you're not serious, don't do it. This is not something. This is not a bring a puppy home and then give it away. No, this is a relationship that you're starting with a young person, and you need to be in there for the long haul. And you need to be in there for more than just money. It's about a lot more than just money. It's about a relationship and telling them how special they are, and hopefully, being a part of their life, even to be able to go and see them. All right, perfect. Thank you, sir. Man, you just keep saving the day. So here we are, and the very first thing that I was able to do was to go and listen to Dwayne preach for the very first time. I'd never heard him preach. It was awesome. And when we went in, and granted I had to sit off to the side, so that's my view there that you see on the left of him preaching. And on the right, that's most of our team from El Salvador. It's not all, because actually we didn't take any, I didn't have any good pictures of the whole team until that was the end. And there were a few of the there was a couple of the older ladies that were just too worn out. They just couldn't handle it. So they didn't make it to the closing meeting. So they're not in the pictures, but that is most of the team. We had 168 salvations total. So that was a really good thing. On the left, we see that's one of the smaller teams. You can see there's Wilson right next to me. There's a young man that's to my left. You're right that he was a big part of this. He actually teaches Sunday school things in a lot of the areas that we go to. So, and on the right there, the gentleman sitting next to me, that was the pastor that I was with. That's Pastor Mauricio and his wife and his father. So that was our smaller teams. So on the left, we see a couple of our translators. In the back on the right there, you see a special young man. Anyway, we have our translators there, and Wilson and I. And then on the right, was my first tears. Okay, so I'm a crier, right? So it's just one of those things. I'm an emotional guy. This, if you compare the picture of my granddaughter at this age, they look a lot alike. They're about the same skin color, they're about the same size, everything. They were all a lot alike. We went to a visit. This was actually in town, and we had just gone through neighborhoods and going from door to door, just banging on doors, seeing if people would answer and listen to the gospel. We came in, and this grandmother, who was saved, by the way, answered the door, and it was just her and her granddaughter. Her granddaughter had lost her mother recently, and her dad has to work, so the grandmother comes to take care of her when she's there. She didn't speak any English, but immediately I started to share the gospel with her with the Evangicube, right? The Evangicube is wonderful for that age group, right? You can show her pictures. And she immediately, as soon as I opened it, she said, wait, in Spanish. And then she ran into the other room, and she came back, and she was so excited. And it was like we'd known each other forever. And she gets up next to me, and she starts showing me. And she has a coloring book from Samaritan's Purse. So not only was I involved with seeing the results of compassion, but I saw the results of Samaritan's Purse as well. She was the recipient of one of the boxes. And so she was so excited. And then she started sharing Jesus with me through the, like I said, her grandmother was saved. And it was wonderful. I tried my best to get this young lady compassion because I wanted to sponsor her and be a lifelong partner. Right? But anyway, that so far has not happened. And she will likely age out. Her name is Paula. All right, so this is something that I was blessed with too that Dwayne didn't get, and that was the truck. So this is the way we get around. And we're in the back. It's like a little military truck, right? And you get to sit in the back, and the back is open, and all the dust from all the roads just rolls right into the back. It's awesome. And one of the cool things is that as you drive around, I learned something about our pastor that I'm working with. You know, you're always worried. What is this church like? Who is this pastor? Is he really a man of God? What's his heart like? So we're driving down the road, and every time he stops, I hear them beep the horn, and then he stops, and people jump in. And you just look. And they don't jump in, they just hang on the back. And then all of a sudden, he stops again, and they get off. And I'm like, oh, this happens everywhere we go, and they're all hollering to him and doing all these things. And I'm like, oh, my pastor's got a heart for people. You know, you can tell. They all know him in this area. and he gives them rides to places and all kinds of things. So it was a wonderful experience. The roads on the left, believe it or not, that is not Southwest Oklahoma. It looks like it, but if it wasn't for all the green, it looks exactly like it. That's exactly what the roads in my town look like. So, but it was a little bit rough. Man, I'm gonna have to like click through them really fast, I guess, because it did it again. Maybe you could just stay there. So, but like I said, I was at the edge of town. So the church that I was in, most of the churches, they're kind of an open air that have temporary sites that they put down for the rain, stuff like that. So I was actually in, this is really cool, the building that was a bar for many years and converted to a church. Amen. Right? That's awesome. And so they turned it into a church. And I'll tell you something. So I keep up with. Oh, sorry. He's like, hey, you're moving. Okay. So I was able to work with this church, and hopefully you didn't skip any. I don't think you did. Yeah, that's it. So I was able to work with this church, and one of the things that I do is I keep up with him. Now, unfortunately, he preaches only in Spanish, and I don't know Spanish. Okay, but I can tell you that I'll show my wife. They have service almost every night, almost every day. He's uploading to Facebook the service they have. If not in the main church, in the satellite churches, and sometimes in both. So this is a church that's on fire, and it's really cool. Okay, on the left, you see that there's our team. We went out into the country, and what most of us would call homeless. I don't know if they consider themselves homeless because they had plastic and they had sticks, right? So they were out of the rain. I did meet one that was didn't have even that. He and his wife completely outside. Wilson and I standing there in this basically a little alley, a little dirt road. And has anybody noticed the plants behind me, by the way? Okay, my pictures aren't about the plants, but if you'll look at that, I tried to explain to them that everywhere that was just growing wild in the ditches looks like a nursery here. It looks exactly like a nursery, and they just grow wild there. So I thought that was pretty cool. Okay, next one. I don't know why it's just locking up, but it probably is. It works fine in my house. So this was a really good experience for me. My first trip was many years ago to Chile, and it was the same thing. It was solely about going and knocking on doors and meeting people on the street. Wherever you could get somebody to stop for a second, you shared the gospel. That's what pretty much my trip to El Salvador was like. The pastor would drop us off in certain locations, and we would just go find people. Most of the pictures that I took, I only took a few. It's just really not about the pictures, but most of the pictures that I took, I'm going to see if it works or don't touch it. Okay, I won't touch it. So I believe this was the next picture. This lady here, she lives in this camp. Okay, they go out and work in the field, basically, picking coffee, different things like that. And she has a somewhat of a shelter, but it's pretty much a tent that she lives in. She has 3 kids. This is the smallest one. When I was able to share the gospel with this lady, was an amazing, amazing event. Okay, it doesn't always happen this way, but every once in a while you watch somebody receive the Holy Spirit, and it's a special, special time. And this was this lady. And she tried to say no. She was broken, and she tried to say no. And we were walking away, and I just couldn't. I said, there's something, and we can't leave. And one of the guys that was from El Salvador was with me, and I said, listen, we can't leave this lady. God's speaking to her heart, I know it. And so we walked over there, and the one problem with the translator is there's such a gap, and it makes a conversation hard. And I asked him, would you just talk to her? Just talk to her. And he talked to her for a minute, and all of a sudden she turned back to me, and she just started smiling and crying at the same time. And so then we walked through the steps of salvation. So she told him. So, not only did she get saved, and then I had a Bible in my backpack, and I almost walked off. And I thought, oh, wait, hold on. I got to find a Bible. So I turned around. She doesn't speak English, but she doesn't read. But I did ask her, I said, is there somebody in your family that does? And she said, yes, her oldest. Her oldest reads a little bit. So I gave her this Bible. You would have thought that I had just given her $5 million. I've never seen a face light up like that. You know, it was... And it's we have them everywhere, right? But she realized that she just met God. And now she has his voice to put with it. And we just pray that her son is able to be there and always read it to her. Okay, next one. All right, so you see on the left, this is what compassion can do. Wilson is sharing. Wilson is using the cube to share the gospel with this lady. She turned it down. She said no to that. But he shared it, and that was an amazing, amazing moment for me to watch him, to be able to do this. The gentleman on the right got saved. He actually spoke English. Every once in a while you would run across somebody who made it into the United States. He made it into the United States illegally, and then got kicked out later. That's how he ended up back in El Salvador. But while he was here, he learned to speak English. And then he made it back just in time for us to be able to share the gospel with him. And the young man got saved. Okay. All right. So after sharing those, my wife, I shared this with her so she could see the pictures that I'd chosen. And she said, well, what about this picture that's on the left? And I said, well, why would I want to show that? She said, so you could show that it's not all just you walk up, you share the gospel, and they accept. And it's not. Neither one of these pictures are like this. Satan is there as well, and he works hard. And when the Holy Spirit is moving, he's working hard. Okay. So you see the two gentlemen on the right picture on the right, the two gentlemen on the right that are facing me. Both of them, you could tell that something was happening. I mean, these are rough, tough men. These are grown men, but they were breaking down. You could tell something was going on. They were raised. When they were little in a Catholic church, they knew something wasn't right. Now, the gentleman that's standing there with his hand on the table and his hand on his hip, all right, he decided today he's going to work for Satan. And he didn't threaten me. He didn't do anything like that. He didn't need to. But he made sure that they understood that they would not be doing any such thing. And he was the boss. They worked for him. I wouldn't want to. You wouldn't want to be him. All right, so on the right, this man was keeping his wife from getting saved. She was just in the process of saying yes to Jesus when he walked in. And we knew she was scared of him because when she heard his footsteps, she looked like she had seen a ghost. So we knew that she was scared of him. Fortunately, there were two ladies with us. We wouldn't have been inside this. You can see it's a plastic little tent, but we wouldn't have been in there with this lady if we weren't. You know, there was women in there, so it wasn't that. It was the fact that he didn't want her talking to anybody. Okay, so the men in this area that were very controlling. You could tell that. But anyway, the only thing that I knew how to do was to try and share with him. I understand what it means to cast your pearls to the pigs, but I didn't know what else to do. It didn't work. That's why you don't cast your pearls to pigs. It didn't work, but I tried anyway, and we just hope that she has another chance someday. Okay. All right. Now the young man on the left, very special. He couldn't come out. His parents weren't there. Nobody was there. But we had a long talk, and he was a very positive young man. He had been saved. He was a new Christian, and so he was really into receiving some encouragement. So I was able to encourage him and give him some positive words. They were going through a really tough time in their family. Now on the right, this is what you do when you're not sure what you want to show to get to what the people want to see. you put a kid like that up there and everybody goes, oh. And he was just like that. I have videos of he and I playing and all kinds of things. And that was a special time for me to kind of relax and to be able to just enjoy life and love and little kids and stuff. He was a special little boy. Okay. All right. So we have satellite churches. It was really, really cool. Mauricio had his main church, and then he had planted churches out in the country. And so we went out to this satellite church, which is on the right. And I was blessed enough to be able to preach in that one night, that night actually. And the one on the left, those young ladies, you can't hardly see one of them because she's got the colors all blend in with that black behind her. But there's two young ladies, and they both got saved. They are literally within 100 yards of this church. You want to know why people react to missionaries? I don't know, but they do. The pastor, he was a great man. He's a good man. He'd been trying, and they wouldn't listen. And, and he looks at me too, and I said, well, I don't know. And he said, I don't know either. But who cares? They got saved. It was an amazing time. Now, I thought I had a picture of this, and my wife thought you would enjoy it. It is kind of a strange picture, but I couldn't find it. This church, there's a bathroom right to the left. There is some metal around it, and there is a hole with a piece of wood on it. Right? That's the bathroom. And then that's a rain barrel that's underneath right there by the door, and that's where you wash your hands in the rain barrel. So it's kind of cool. It's kind of a cool experience. I say cool. She says no way. And believe me, the two ladies that went with us, they were like, I don't think so. But anyway, that was okay. Next, these two got saved, and Brother Dwayne led them to the Lord. And I'll be honest, I was a little jealous about the one on the right. I've been talking to this guy for a while. This was the security guard at the hotel we were staying at. And he just kept smiling, and I'd use my translator on my phone, and he'd smile and grin. He was so friendly. And then one day I walk out, and Dwayne says, hey, guess what happened? The security guard got saved last night. Man, what? I thought I was going to be able to see that. This is a young man on the left. Dwayne and I went to Walmart. The Walmart wasn't open and the gate was closed. This young man walks up. Dwayne immediately starts sharing the gospel with him. It was so cool. It's really cool if you want to go walk around with Dwayne. And by the way, I've done that here. He does the same thing right here. So if you want to go enjoy that. All right. Now this is the only pictures I have that's like this, but I just want you to understand that these are both in town. That kind of gives you an idea. Okay, the one on the left is at the edge of town, but it is in town. If I turned around, I should have turned around and showed you what it looked like on the other side. It's just a block full of houses and things. It's in town. And the one on the right, that's actually the back lot behind the church I was working at. So that's kind of what it looks like there. Okay. All right. Now I'm not going to read this because I want to keep us this because I could do a whole sermon and the sermon is going to be 30 minutes minimum. So, but I do want you to understand that when I was really focused in on obedience, this is one of the messages that came to me. I taught it in Sunday school. I've been using it. I used it in Belize, and many of you will recognize it and know it. So Jesus is first. He's beginning his public ministry. Okay, and now he's made the big healing moments happen. That draws a crowd. It's one thing to draw a crowd with your speech. You start healing people, they come out of the woodwork. Okay, so he's starting to have this. He's starting to heal people. He casted out a demon. He's healed somebody. And now all of a sudden, here he is at the Sea of Galilee, at the beach, basically. We see this scene where he's walking and he's teaching these people, but he's trying to talk to them. And he runs across Peter and the boys. So Simon at the time, he tells him, I'm going to jump in your boat and I'm going to push out a little bit. And I want to, that way I can teach. It makes sense, right? If all of you guys just kind of crowded in around me, the only people who would hear would be the ones right next to me, and it would be really hard to talk. So you can kind of make sense of what he's doing here. He gets out, he pushes away, and he teaches. Then when he goes to leave, he tells them, he said, go ahead, Peter, let's push out a little ways and you throw your nets. Well, we see early on in this text that they had been fishing all night long. They were cleaning their nets. Okay? So they've been fishing all night long, cleaning their nets. And when he tells them to push out, Simon tells Jesus, he said, well, we've been fishing all night long. We didn't catch anything. But since you say so, and you need to remember that just not long before this, he healed his mother-in-law. He just heard him teaching. So he understands something's going on here. So he does give him the respect, and he says yes, and he does. And immediately they fill the nets. Till the scripture tells us the nets almost break. Then he calls his buddies, the boats come out, and he tells us that these probably 23 feet long wooden boats that are probably 4 feet deep begin to sink. 2 boats. This is an incredible catch, right? And look at Peter's reaction. Go away from me, Lord. Most of us read that and go, why would he say that? Well, why would he say that? He just realized. He's like, you know what? At the least, this is a prophet. If this is not like my brother said, and this is the Messiah, this is a prophet at least. And I'm not worthy of being involved in this catch, and I'm not even worthy enough to be in the boat. So he had a humble moment, didn't he? Okay? The kind of moment we should all have when we encounter God. But he did what he said. And then interestingly enough, Jesus' reply to this was, don't be afraid. From now on, you're going to be catching men. Now, that makes sense to us because here we are on a Sunday night. This is a group that reads their word. You've been coming to Sunday school and church, for years. You understand this. Realize that at this time, they don't know what he's talking about. What do you mean? You're going to take a net downtown? What are we going to do? We're going to get in trouble for catching men with nets. I'm not sure what we're doing here. But what was their reaction? It says they put back to the beach and they left everything. God didn't explain. He didn't tell them the plan. But they left. You see, these 3 bullet points down here, these were hard to hear. This is something that I felt really loud voice to me from God in my quiet time. God doesn't ask us to understand. He asks us to obey. He didn't ask how I feel about it either. God does ask us to trust Him and follow through by your obedience. All right. Belize. Oh my goodness. This is going to be a fast one. Okay? And it can be. Because it doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know why I went to Belize. I don't know why I was being called to Belize. The whole thing didn't make sense. The trip to Belize to go check things out makes sense because I had a friend that moved there. Okay, so that's how that happened. That's how the Corozal was put on my heart. But the fact that I was going to go back and work with a pastor I've never met, with a church I've never been to, we talked on the phone quite often actually. To work with VBS, Bob, I'm not a VBS guy. Okay, I don't understand little kids. I mean, you want to know crazy? I understand teenagers. That's crazy. Right? So it's a different kind of crazy. I don't know why I was going here. But I did. God said, don't ask me why. I don't need to explain it. I don't need your opinion. I said, go. And it's going to get even more confusing. Okay. That's Corozal, by the way. Corozal is an interesting town. It's a very, Belize is a very strange, interesting mix, okay? But the church is on the right. That actually used to be a popular, like a grocery store that closed. And now the church is on top, okay? So actually it's a pretty nice building. They've been there for I guess right around a year. They were in an open air community center before this. On the left, anybody who works at VBS, I've only done it a handful of times. You guys know what's going on here. It takes 3 times longer to set up VBS than it actually does to have it. Try having it when it's 90% humidity and 100 degrees. And there's no air conditioning, by the way. Oh, man. It was fun. Okay, next. So we got it all set up. It actually looked really good. We ended up having about 100 kids every day there. So it was a really good turnout. This was the first time this church had ever had VBS on their own. They had it once before when the mission group came in, and they basically did everything like Bob does. So this was the first time they had done it. They did it a little bit different, so it was not what I was used to, but they had a good turnout. But we had a lot of kids. We did go. The age group was definitely up there. I think one of the big benefits was that there's a group that they call the cadets. So the police are trying really hard to build relationships with the community through the kids, and they have a cadet program. And all of the cadets were wanting to come to this. And as a matter of fact, the second in command of the police in Belize came to our VBS. So it was kind of cool. They wanted to come, and they did a little interview and all that stuff about it. But it was about the fact that these cadets were here, and they were trying to lead these kids in the right direction. Now, doesn't mean that they know what they're doing about leading them to Jesus, because I had to witness to the policeman. He was lost. The Catholic influence is in the schools. Okay, when you first hear what's going on in Belize, you're excited. You're like, hey, they teach Bible lessons in school. That's great. I wish we did that. And then you find out what they're teaching. Oh, that makes it up. You just made it harder, is what you did. And it makes it really difficult to talk to them. But I was able to do that. Next. All right. So in one way, it was very similar. We had outdoor games. We had all the kids together in one room, and then we would split up in different areas like that. Next. The one on the left, that's my group. So I had a group, like I said, the age groups were a little bit different. I had a 10 to a 12, and we actually had a group that was older than that. So we took in some older kids, even though it was VBS, because of the cadet program. But it was a really good thing. And next. So again, what do? I'm not a VBS guy. I don't know how to put one of these things together, but I do know how to pick the cutest kid in the place. Actually, he followed me all over the place. He was one of the coolest little boys, and I was able to get that shot. But these kids, they're really happy to be there, okay? Because they enjoy being able to get out and have fun with their friends and have candy and snacks and all the tricks that Bob uses with the candy. And we use that. We had all these things, and they just loved it. And then we were able to share Jesus with them. The next, we had a fun day. So here's you an idea, Bob. Fun day was 6 hours on Saturday. So we did a 6-hour Saturday. We had blow-ups, we had water games, we had all this stuff. And I was so excited. So I got with the youth group. They had a small youth group, but a cool one. And I was able to have some little sit-down powwows with them and talk about how to share the gospel, how to share their testimony and these things. And we did that. And the whole plan was that on this night, when all the parents showed up, I was going to take all the youth and we're going to go out there and we're going to share the gospel, and none of the parents showed up. Yeah, so it was kind of heartbreaking, but it's just one of those things. You do what God tells you to do, and He's responsible for the rest. The kids had a blast, though. Okay, next. Now, these little kids, they stayed on this one thing. We had a little pop-up tent to get some shade because it's so hot, and we filled that thing with water, and they stayed in there for 6 hours. I don't know how they stayed in there all the entire time. So just a little quick funny. I took remember the suitcases? So I took suitcases full of stuff. I didn't realize that it was all of the stuff. So I hauled the entire setup in the suitcases, right? You have to get creative. And by the way, those little vacuum pack things, you can suck down all kinds of stuff and get them on there. But we did that. And one of the suitcases had probably, 30 water guns. Okay, so took a kiddie pool, filled it up with water, and I took a box and just dumped water guns all over the grass. And every parent that was there that's in the church, right, the guest parents didn't show, all of them went, hey. Because they know what's coming. Everybody's getting wet to that. Which, I don't know how they didn't appreciate it. It was so hot. All right, next. All right, so on the left, that is Brother David and his wife. and their son, and their son is something else. Okay, he's a leader in their youth group. I spent a lot of time with him, and it's one thing, you would think that you're your preacher's kid, right? The preacher's kid should already know how to do everything. I found that sometimes, I'm not picking on the right, but I have found, it's my experience, that sometimes preacher's kids and deacon's kids get left behind. Because everybody assumes they know how to do everything, like they're born into it, right? And so I kind of took that on with him. We just kind of hooked up, and I told him how to go out and share the gospel, and how not to be afraid, how to approach somebody, what to say first, and so on. And he just jumped on board. Really smart young man. Going into medical school. On the right, I had some downtime. So I wanted to feel, I don't have any more pictures, because I didn't have somebody there taking pictures for me, right? Most of those I took the last minute going, oh my gosh, I didn't take any pictures. But, so in order to fill some time and figure out what I was going to do with this time, because I had asked for visitation schedules. So I'd asked for somebody to take me around, to take me to some places, and that didn't happen. Okay? So then I was just on my own to figure out what I'm going to do. So one day, I'm like, okay, I've already been to the parks at the beach and didn't have much luck there. I was able to share with somebody, and then I went to the store, was able to share with somebody, but I needed a place with a lot of people, right? And so I asked somebody, and they said, hey, there's a senior center that's down there across from the park, and they call it the Help Belize, the Help Age. And so they all gathered there. And I said, great, let's go. So I pulled up, and as I told the preacher's wife, someone told me about it, as I'm telling her, she's texting her husband, and David's like, I don't have any plans there. I don't have any plans there. It's a senior center, And so I just went and pulled up, and I parked and went to walking up the sidewalk. They're all sitting outside. There's no air conditioning. So if you get any breeze, you sit outside. And so I walked up, and there was a gentleman that met me at the sidewalk, and he's serious as could be. And he looked right at me, and he said, how old are you? And I said, well, how old do you have to be to get in here? And he said, older than you. And I said, well, can I visit? And he was just playing, he was not serious, and that's right up my alley, right? And so I knew I was in the right place. And I played dominoes all day with these people. So we had a good time. I was able to witness and minister to a young man, or a gentleman from Guatemala that was outside that just happened to be walking by. But I'm going to tell you that there was no salvations. I didn't see anybody except Jesus the entire time I was in Belize. Now, I will tell you that while we were at BBS, they shared the gospel with the entire group, and 3/4 of the young ones in the front all raised their hands. Now, I was very proud that the church didn't say, great, that's 40. Because that's not right. They didn't understand. So we quickly, all the leaders got together and said, hey, they don't understand this. So let's get together with the groups individually, and we did that. So that we know of, there was lots of seeds planted, but there were no salvation. So we didn't lead anybody to Christ. But we know one thing, that I went down there, I did what I was told. I worked as hard as I could to do whatever I could and try to love on everybody and do what God told me to do. And sometimes that's the way it works. You just do what you're told, right? So I think that's the last one, isn't it? Yeah. All right. Hey, 6 o'clock. Wow, that's a miracle. I did this at home and it didn't even come out close to that. So that was a good thing. And we had some technical difficulties. But anyway, I do want to thank you guys for letting me share. And I want to encourage you that it doesn't matter if you're the one that goes, or you're the one that supports, or you're the one that prays. They're all equal. They're all equal. It takes all of those things. So, but we're all called to be a part of this. Trust me, Jesus is coming back soon. If you know that, right? But what's the Bible say? You can't see, you see the signs of the rain clouds, but you can't see, we see the signs. Jesus has got to be coming back soon. We need to be motivated. And something that I've been talking to Dwayne about, I got my toes stepped on by a gentleman that was down there that I felt a connection to really fast. This happens to you. I know that some of the missionaries can probably tell you that. You meet somebody, all of a sudden you feel like they're your family. And you know what he told me? He was the pastor's father-in-law, so he had already heard the stories. And I'm not bragging, I'm just saying that I went down there to work. I didn't have anything else to do. So they were all talking about how this guy from the United States came down here just to work for BBS, and he's here all the time and all this stuff, right? And every time we turn around, he's talking to somebody. Well, he sat down and he asked me, and I don't know if he intentionally did this or God told him to do this, and he didn't even know what he was doing. But he looked at me right now on Family Fun Day, and he said, I got a question for you. Are you this passionate and bold when you're at home? I didn't say anything because I know that's not true. I don't do this at home. Why? Why don't we do this at home? Now, unfortunately, Brother Dwayne gave me a little comfort the other day when he said sometimes when you're fishing and you don't catch any fish, you can get pretty discouraged. And you got to go somewhere where they're biting to get excited again. And then you come back and go fishing. But the point is you got to come back and go fishing. For men, we need to be out sharing the gospel. And I don't care who you are, how old you are, where you go, you have an opportunity. And that's what we've been called to do. And to be obedient, we have to do that. Thanks, you guys.